This talk is actually just to delve into leadership of design and how architects will be in charge of that if you really have your design acumen, and also how you manage design so that it doesn't, because most of the time, if your design is 100% perfect, the contractor will build up to 85% correct, right? Then if you have your drawings, which is 85% correct, they only build up to 65% correct. That's another problem that we need to deal. So, but sometimes we need to understand about design more than just doing design. And that's the reason why Sophia asked me to say how can we actually talk about design when it's not just design is design. It's more than just that. So I'll take one angle, which is actually a design generator, because that's the one maybe easy to handle, to control, and to be guided, and everybody else in the team of the construction, or even the authorities, or even ourselves can manage together. There will be about 12 odd buildings that I'm going to show, but it is just a show of how these architects handle design. Some of it are mine, some of it are actually others. But before I go into the buildings itself, I think we need to go back to the roots and also the lecture per se about design. Okay? So that's my CV. Okay, so we always talk about architects, and in school of architecture, we always been taught about representation, abstraction, and then you're talking about you need to actually address society. And furthermore now, when the world is getting into urbanization, you need to actually handle fabric. You know, fabric where it's not just singular building, it's actually a collection of building. And it may not be a collection of building, it now be a string of streets that have buildings in it. So that's very, very crucial, especially when you are moving towards new things. Then you're talking about change of use. You know, like for instance, when we have old cities, Kuala Lumpur is actually an old city also, but it's not old as old like in Greek. But the rate of us demolishing building is far, far greater than even in the European cities. So where is that balance? So that's also how we handle design. Then talking about architecture, you know, I was reading a book about does architecture really matters. You know, there's a book. Later I'll show you. You know, it really put ourselves thinking about why is so architecture important. And like just this morning we talked about materials, right? Materials is one part of how it's being used on our architecture. And it will reflect back onto us if we don't do it properly with the materials that we have. So then just the question about cultural, you know, like I was talking to just now, the first thing that people do when they go to a showroom is whether it's a solid wall or hollow wall, there's a perception control. So this is the thing that about cultural. Then how we actually use space. Have you heard about sick building? People get more sick when they do and stay in the building rather than they work outside. So that's also another issue that talk about design. So then there's this, another thing is the happiness index of being in the architecture space. Whether you're happy to be there, whether you get more sad or more depressed being inside there. So that's why now even AirAsia have done their office building is not about cubicles, it's actually you work everywhere. Because it's Wi-Fi generation, right? So that's one way. Even like the PAM center is like that also. You can be anywhere. If you know the home password here, you just be anywhere and you can do your work or attend meetings. So architecture is not just about design, it's actually how you handle human design, and then you handle cultural and also the humanistic elements. Like for instance, this room, there's actually rows and series of glass windows by your side, but it purposely put at the bottom because so that you still have got that connection between this high level and the street, because people always want to tend to be in relation to where they are. So that's very important also. So this is also about design. You know, when you're sitting, you get 2 hours of lecture, you have to have connection back to nature, back to your reference point. So that's also an emotional control. Then people say architecture is a combination of arts and science. Is it true? Is it the only thing, or is it just arts, or is it human? And then there's this also another part is politics. So I was told in architecture school, sometimes you got to be taught about the politics of architecture and the architecture of politics. So I got confused there. So sometimes in the lecture stream, you know why we follow a certain lecturer, because he's into what you want. But when you want to be in your doing your final year thesis, you also get how should I say entangled. He or she doesn't want to take your paper because it's actually against his principle or her principle. So, but you want him or her to become your tutor. So that's also how you have got to handle. So that's why I said architecture is not just the physical thing; it's a lot of other things as well. So I think at the end, we need to look at the future of architecture. And thank God, in 2015, during the COP21, we architects of the world, 2 million of them at that moment of time, we signed up an accord, a pledge to the world, and we told COP21, we told through UIA, the International Union of Architects that actually governs all the 190 countries, and 2 million of those architects, with the United Nations, we have to do responsible architecture. It's not just about that building must be nice, but it has to be responsible. Both sustainability and also others. So that's a pledge. You can look up responsible architecture, it's there, and it's been going on, and the last World Urban Forum in Abu Dhabi also has been reiterated about how architecture can help to save the only earth that we have. So I think to help us to make design as we know best, to guide us and to help us go through the problems of clients, the problems of authorities, and the problems of between us in the office, we have to actually have certain traits. And these are things that it has to be there, and I tend to follow this because if not, I cannot get what I want at the end of the day. So in architecture, you don't stop, you don't retire, but you only slow down. So at the age of 55 or 60, you don't actually stop architecture, you actually slow down. That's why this term called active practitioner. So you still need to go for CPD, like what we are doing here, and you still need to know what's next and what's also beyond and what's also after. So that's where we have to actually lead, and we need to be an active practitioner. Sometimes we need to be a coach. Have you ever, when you open your office, most of the graduates, you come through you have to actually coach them rather than teach them, but you coach them to what you wanted them to be for your office. I think because it's also delve into our own culture, right? So that's what, there has to be a mind of a coach. A coach is different than a trainer, okay? A good coach can lead you to become a world-class runner or world-class badminton player. That's why India, at one time, they beat Malaysia flat out because they got a good coach. Because the coach is not a badminton player, but it's a coach that actually tell about how to become great. So this is where I think we need to be good in coaching. We need to be active. When I say active practitioner just now is you need to be updated with whatever things about architecture and also beyond architecture. Then leadership in design also is also a team player. You know, there's some architects, not just here, but also in outside there, the level-headed. That's it, and that's it. You have to have it. But you need to be a team player too, or else you cannot produce what you want to produce. Isn't that right? Okay, so from the top to the bottom, and also levels of your, especially when the office is big, when you have 200 architects, how do you handle that? If you have read through the YouTube how Norman Foster handles his office, from London, handles in Singapore, all those sort of things, it's how he has to become a team player too. And that's where studio and crits are very, very crucial, and that's where the difference between us and other professions is because of studio. Then, one more thing, you need to be open-minded. Whatever I'm writing here, I'm reminding myself too, okay, not just yourself. Like, I'm not giving a sermon, actually sharing what I actually learned for the past 27 years, dealing with all kinds of clients. Some are stubborn, some are level, some are very, very, how shall I say, sometimes they know more than us because they travel more than us. So we have to be open-minded too. And we need to be open not just to the clients, we need to be open even to our fellow consultants. Sometimes they are our savior at the moment when we are actually presenting it. They come up with the brilliant idea that we have not even thought. So sometimes we need to have that sort of trust that we build between team members. Then we need to create an actionable feedback. What do you mean by actionable feedback? You need to give them an opportunity that whatever they say has got relevance. It's not importance, it's relevance. That means you treat them like you too. Because they also know best in their fields. Like for instance with planners or landscape or even your own staff, your junior architects. Like in my office, before we even finalize everything, I even tell the junior, you go back 5 minutes, come back to me, what you think of it. So that we have a healthy conversation. Not a discussion, it's actually conversation more important because as I said just now, architecture is so serious when people tend to be into the drawings, it is so personalized. So I try to get away from that. So that's the reason why I need to create that sort of environment for them to live, or else, you see a lot of absenteeism. I've gone through that when people get bored or the boss doesn't want to listen to me. So when they go through the project, you are supposed to have 10 people in the team, but end up with only 6 actively participating because the other 4 doesn't want to take care. Then you must be an adaptive or adapting tone. Sometimes when you school a person, when you actually teach a person, when you actually direct a person, that's also another way of managing it. And mind you, this sort of things, as what Sophie is saying, at site will be translated from your paper in your office to the site. Because if you got a team or even the staff that is actually lowered down in their spirits, when they go to site, they don't want to actually make it theirs. It's because they say, no, that's my boss, not mine. I only work for him. So we need to have that trust so that you can actually ensure whatever we decide on paper in the office comes back on site as what is going to be built at site. And I think that's where the task is, to bring whatever beautiful drawings that you have done in the office to fruition to make it the best at site. Then, sometimes this is actually the age of collaboration. You know, like Sophie was saying just now, we are jack of all trades. We seem to know all, but actually no. Sometimes we need to be updated. Updated through your own team. So collaborative. Like for instance, when I was doing something about, there was this one project about a township. It's not the qualification of the person that actually dictates and create that end result. This project that I'm going to show later is the night alarm. It was not even approved by the CEO or the MD of the corporate, but it was approved and it was advised to be approved by the CFO, the guy who holds the money. And it's talking about design. What has got money and design got to do? Because they will always say, choose the lowest and cheapest cost. But he said, no, we need to go for this because, or else we cannot sustain. Later I'll tell you why. Then, whatever you do in your words, you have to do in action. That means to say that, walk the talk. And this is very, very crucial. And I think that's where we need to foster that. And that's why some great architects like Toyo Ito, he has this, you know, he is adamant to whatever. He always liked to create some things different. In one of his buildings, he was trying to recreate the normal modernist grid. He said, modernism is dead, so you must recreate the grids. One building is doing that. And we must communicate clearly and consistently. What do you mean by communicate? Communicate means whatever instructions, whatever communication system, whether it's fax, text, message, SMS, or WhatsApp, or whatever, even email, it has to be succinct and precise. And they will look up on you and they will tend want to follow you because if they know you're confident, even though it is a bit dicey 50-50. Because architects are always, we were taught in school to create optimism. And I think this is where, you know, you always say that, right? Can it be done? Can. Then you go back to office, how to do it. So that's the optimism that we got to create, and that's the level of optimism that we were taught in school. So I think we got to carry that, and very, very crucial. And we got to say thank you. You know, whatever I do say thank you, and whether it's bad or good, you just say thank you, then we learn it from there. Because as the saying says, what's your good project? I'll say the next project. So we learn from our past projects. And I think once we learn to go down to the level of the commoners, then people will not say architects are stuck up. They are, and that's where the problem is. We need to be able to let the society know that we are here to assist and to make the world a better place through what we know best, which is how to work with many different people, how to collaborate your knowledge of design, and to actually synthesize your what you can see forward, structure-wise, and on paper, so that they can actually follow you step by step. And that's why now in the world they got this architects community. You know, like in Indonesia they got ARCOM. So they use architects to assist them to draw for them what they think is a house. Okay, so and be nice. That's usual thing. So design generators. I call it generators because it's much more generic than concepts. And that design generators is very crucial because it will help people to actually relate. So I got a few projects here, so just sit back. I don't take a lot projects from Europe or US, but I take it from our own Asian counterparts because their weather is close to us, but they produce some work which is actually, how should I say, quite remarkable, and it's to be noted. And these are all from my travels and also some of my projects which I participated and also constructed and get it done. So this is actually to share, because I think that's another issue that I would like to express here. Architects tend to be so focused that, if anything that we want to talk about, their design is actually pitched into their own thinking. Like the world now, they got Instagram, they got Facebook. I notice when I engage with a lot of my friends in Indonesia, even they start sketching, they put on Instagram their idea. So, it's something like, it's not a show-off thing, but it's actually more of sharing that I'm starting something new for you to actually see the development of it. Whereas here, I think we tend to be, until it's completed, then you see, it's done by this architect, this architect. I think we need to change that. And I think that's more fruition. We need to have more dialogues. And that's the reason why I think in order to produce good design, you need to have more form of dialogue. And sometimes this dialogue, if you go to some of these countries that they don't have proper space, even a coffee warung, they just open up this blank paper, put it up wall, screen it up on the projector, they do their own studio create session. Practice, not studio, no, in university, is in practice. Anybody can just do that. So I think we need to start that. So these are some of the buildings that I need to show to you. So, okay, these just go on their own. Okay, the first building is about the KAOHSIUNG Exhibition Center. Some of it are in Taiwan, because they actually go down to people. They got the same population as us, about 30 million, but they done some nice buildings. It's about 250,000 square feet, designed by Philip Cox. It's by the harbor, and the thing is that generator, that word there is actually the meaning of KAOHSIUNG. So that's the symbol of KAOHSIUNG. So how they transform it into a design and creates a new benchmark at that time in 2015, and it is really a place. If you all have gone to KAOHSIUNG in Taiwan, you should go there and have a feel. And it's about waves, and over there they got typhoon, but that also can survive the typhoon of 14 times in 3 months. So this the reason one of these buildings that I'm showing to you, and how the pedestrians can enjoy. And they got in front of it now, there's a tram that comes across in the outside of this building. So that's a really public thoroughfare and public use of the building. Like for instance, it's not just a building that you need to go through the main gate. It's actually part of the whole cityscape. And some of it are from my own collection, some of it from the contractors, because I go there often and they do give me those construction drawings. And how they do it is they use IBS. A lot of it are by IBS, and they got programs that can actually economize on the materials. Another building is actually the stadium, the National Stadium in KAOHSIUNG, done by Toyo Ito. This building, it's actually now the first stadium that is powered by PV cells. There are about 8,844 PV cells there to actually power the stadium. And if the stadium's not being used, it's actually powering the city. So that's a new way of giving a good design factor to a city to make it much more sustainable. And this is for 55,000 people. And his idea was from a dancing dragon. So that's why this stadium is actually not a closed loop. It's actually open from the entrance. So it's much more a good entrance portico that actually drives people from the forecourt to the field. And look at how the PV cells can even bend, and it's using tubular steel, and it's actually there, and for many of the sports and also of the New Year is there. And also there's a park by the side there. Later you can see the picture of the park. It's actually a part of the city park for their new city in KAOHSIUNG to the north. And this building, because of its first use of how to marry energy, architecture design, and make it more human, it actually became the starting point to look at how stadium is a public space rather than a space for you to actually just watch sports. So that's why the seating there, not all are fixed seating. You can even lie on the ground. So your ticket price on the ground is much more expensive than the one on the fixed seating, because you can do whatever you want there. You can bring your picnic and lie down, and that's where happen when you have functions in the summer. And yep, this is the park I was talking about, because they want to balance between having a physical building and also living together, because they got, what, 3 or 4 million people in that city, and they use this as their jogging track, as their exercise and school, to actually have live learning at the sports center. And because of that, this building also now, most governments, even the world now, are going towards universal design, where people on wheelchair can actually go and enjoy sports. So you don't have to use lifts altogether. There's very less lift. So the people on the wheelchair can actually enjoy sports, because these are all ramps. Okay? And you can see how fluid and how the IBS is not so fixed of rectangle. It can be curved, and the natural lighting is so inducive. Okay, the next building, shortly after this, I'm going to show to you is the Taichung Performing Arts Center. Okay, this is almost finished. Okay, Taichung Performing Arts Center, also designed by Toyo Ito. In 2014, when I met him in South Africa, he was saying that he was actually disheartened about modernism because it's so grid-oriented. So, but he wants to produce a humanistic building, but using grid. So he said, I'm actually reinventing the grid. So this building is just, he said, I'm designing the building just like my bones. There's no vertical straight column. It's actually a curvaceous column with walls and column together. So he's using that as the design generator of how to do 3 spaces. There's a lyrical theater, there's a performing art theater, there's also music of symphony orchestra. So this is actually about 280,000 square feet and 6 stories high, and sits in the middle of, so this is using full RC, reinforced concrete. Later, there's another performing arts center in Taiwan. I'm going to show you, they use steel plus your product. So how, I know how they think, and this is actually part of the structure. And he went to site to actually look at how he arranged those steel bars and also this thing. There's actually a mock-up. I think one of the slides shows his mock-up. And because of his leadership in that way, every time when he comes to site, there is always this flock of scientists and also engineers wanting to learn how to actually he does it. When at that time, the the computer programs doesn't have that much capability, but he could do. And you have a look at that building, is so like human, and even though it's so boxy, but if you go inside, later you see this is actually the holes of your nostrils. No, it's how he makes it so human, and that's become a nice balcony. So this is actually how where the walls, the column merge together, but it's actually, when I was inside there, I cannot imagine myself. It's the gargantuan space, so simple color. You know, all these are RC. Okay, that's, you know, like here we are afraid about fire. Right? You know, the fire spread about wall cladding. This is no issue. This is all RC. See the space from inside looking outside is how to enjoy the cityscape, and this is what he's thinking, that he wants to enhance what he has. That city, if you go to Taichung, is so great. It's like New York. You go everywhere, it's all the same. But this thing changes, and this become like a, how shall I say, a place that you can actually refer to. We meet you here. Okay, so because this is different. And it survived a lot of this typhoon. Nobody complained about the building got wet in the wall floor inside, no. So it's how sensitive it could handle itself. And just reading what he said, if we look at the world like a river, then constructing a building is generally just like plunging a wood stake into a river. That means to say, the stake enters, but there's no relationship to flow. That means you don't disturb nature, but you enhance nature. You know, put a stick on the water. So this is the interior space of some of the halls. And then, that's why he's, okay, then another one, you know, in Taiwan, they use a lot of this bottled water, right? So many, they got millions and millions that they throw away. So this building in 2010, yeah, during the Floral Festival, there's this architect said, I want to tell the world that the bottled water can be recycled into a building. So he created a bottled water museum using 7 million of this bottled water. So, and if you look inside, the scaffolding of that construction of the bottled water is still there, is using bamboo, not steel or whatever. And this is to actually experience the importance of water to us. Of course, people ask me, and people ask the architect too, how are your fire requirements when you have this sort of plastic building, right? Because it's a wall of bottles, so the sprinklers are actually attached to all this wall. So if you look at one go, you cannot see where the sprinklers are, but it's actually protected because of vertical sprinklers. So that's where we need to actually have that sort of mind to transfer fire technology into architecture. That's the scaffolding of the bamboo. That can take the weight of that building and still standing there for the past 12 years. And they are so have this thought about water very important, because there's a picture about a burger and a Taiwanese sandwich, right, or Taiwanese food. To produce a burger takes a lot more water than to produce Asian food. So that's the message they want to tell across on. This is how the purpose of this museum. It's all on grid, but it can be curved as well. You can see the details. If you ever go to Taipei, you can see this. We went there in 2015 where Pam did the visit the Taiwan Institute of Architects. Okay, this is the building that I said, another performing arts center. This is now the latest one by Meccano. When I was there, they have not opened, but they almost completed, but I could take some of the construction this is one of the biggest building now actually for performing arts. Is about twice the size of KLCC Suria. So you can just imagine. And they got 4 theaters. One is outdoor, where it's actually, later you can see it's actually in the garden. So the generator is actually that, you know, banyan tree, the tree that drops down to the ground. So that's how they started the concept of the design and generate that design. Because all around that place is got a lot of banyan tree. So it's a competition and Meccano won it, and that's the outdoor theater that I was talking about. I think this is the one. So they got an outdoor one and 3 indoor, and not just indoor. Indoor there is so high. Later you see that they did an indoor-outdoor theater where you can actually sit inclined, like in the planetarium. You can see the screens actually on the wall, and this actually steel frame construction with borrowed some panels. You see how they do it, and it's amazing. But so the two spectrum, concrete and this sort of thing. So this is how they use space, and it's mind-boggling. But these are spaces, and this is where the parts where architects are very important to make a responsible architecture design to enhance whatever they have. Because if you go to Taiwan, you know everybody is so, how shall I say, stressed. Everybody is so stressed. Time. So this is how they construct. So it's quite different from what Toyota does. So these are all the panels. Imagine the full height, you know, the girder beam curving. But at the end of the day, it creates this sort of effect for the city, because if you look around KAOHSIUNG, it's all mountains, and this actually following the curves on the mountains. So what I would like you to not just enjoy, to actually on a Saturday morning is actually to see other places and other kinds of things, not just from the European or American. So this is actually our own MyTech by Hood. All the photos are actually from RSP. Okay, this building, I think most of you all know, it's actually started from the rubber seats, right? But the how they economize on the panels was actually done by the Taiwanese architect's office. So how many you duplicate is actually where IBS comes in, and they calculated how many panels, and all those grooves are just like songket, you know, when you tie your sampin, so you can see all those curves. So this is how the idea, and this is also another way that we can actually create a moment of, I want it to be in this manner, but we work together with you, how you can actually create a good, a normal, from a normal exhibition center to something like an iconic. So it's quite different from what you see in KLCC Convention Center, right? Which is actually a wing structure, but this is actually very curvaceous. I call it more sexy. Of course, they got layers of this material they got to use, but it is actually one of the world's first that they work together with one of the big facade consultants. Okay, the next building that I'm going to show you is actually a museum. This is a totally different museum altogether. If you have been to Taipei, there's this National Palace Museum, one of the, you know, where people say whatever was in China, all stolen put it back to Taipei, it was there, but because they got 7 million things to show. But that all in Taipei cannot. So they built one in Tainan, which is about 80 kilometers north of KAOHSIUNG. This is, the size of it is actually 70 hectares, 200 acres of museum. So this building, his generation, or the generator of the design, is actually how the strokes of the Chinese painting, you know, the stroke, there's a yin and yang, transparency and solidness. So this is how he interpreted it in an art, in the park. So this is how he says a museum is not just a space to keep things, but you need to enjoy it as part of the landscape. So the tree shape there from the brush is actually to show 3 Asian civilization: the China, the India civilization, and also the Persian civilization. So that's actually translated to that. And some of it are using rocks, some of it are using your boards too. So it's a mixture. But what I'm trying to show here is, as I said earlier, is how art and architecture form in a landscape, create something new for these people, and droves of people come here by the busloads, even though it's actually out. If you look at the setting, it's actually out in the countryside, right? But people do come here. So it actually transcends to a different feeling, and people spend their time outdoor and indoor to actually experience this museum. Because to them, water and earth is very important. And they're using steel. That wall there changes because of lighting at night. So they create words, Chinese characters. Then this Taipei 101, it overtook us in 2004, being the tallest building after KLCC. The idea came from bamboo. That's what the architect told, it's from bamboo. But because the building is too tall, they need to put anti-swaying at the top. Rather than hiding it, what they did was they exposed it for people to see and to enjoy it. So that's the part where he created an engineering thing and make it into an architecture that people can enjoy and also can understand how the building works. This is actually a bone of a whale, because a lot of whales come into Taiwan. During this construction, 2 of those big cranes fall down because of the typhoon. But luckily, they placed those cranes, and they know where to place those cranes is away from the building, but it's also they fall on the streets. So, the placement of some of our construction items, like for instance, construction cranes, our scaffolding, are also very crucial and is also to be designed in order to take care of whatever natural causes or natural weather conditions there. And true to the fact that they also study the wind in order to make sure that the building are safe. That's why for this building, if you look up, this almost zero fatality. Okay, this is my project. Our design generator is actually kampung. This Denai Alam won the MIP award. The CFO said, if we don't do this, it will be just like another what we call township, because what we did was the 10% open space for any development is not concentrated in one place. Even though MBSA want us to put 100 acres or 1,000 acres into like a square like Dataran Mereka, I said this is not Dataran Mereka, this is housing estate. So what we did a 5 kilometer walk trail, circumnavigate the whole 1,000 acres. That become our 10% open space. So all houses are within 200 meters from the house. So you don't have to actually drive your open space. And there you have your children's playground, your soccer field, your exercise, and it become also a security trail. And it's been there since about what, 10, 15 years. And the houses prices are there. And the next one is actually Taipei Performing Arts. Is sited next door to a night market. So what you see there is actually beef noodle, right? 2 chopsticks. And so what they did was they stayed in that area for a week to understand the culture of the space, because they do not want to destroy the fabric of the culture of city of Taipei. So that's the reason why you have this sort of big block of things and there's 2 sticks there. And but he created this as an iconic thing which maintained there and create the different performing arts center than any other performing arts center throughout the world. It's already completed, so I think they got the first show this year. And you notice that they use a lot of steel. So maybe we need to shift our thing from concrete to steel so that we can have very flexible design. And even though they got tropical and typhoon, but it can still survive. Next one is our design competition entry for the Dubai. Of course, I didn't win, another person won. But the idea is still a kampung house, still on stilts, but using 5G technology, and everywhere is actually barrier free. You don't have to actually use the lift, it's using a ramp all around. And the idea is the gassing is tilted up on its side, and the building goes up and down using the gassing concept. So it's a moving wall. So our idea is using the traditional gassing into a building form, and this whole sticks there is to exemplify the palm oil that we have, and it uses the, you know, in Dubai they got a lot of wind, so we use the wind catcher to bring down the wind right down to the ground to make it cooler. So it is actually to understand the whole local culture. This is our design entry for the Ibu Kota Negara Indonesia in Kalimantan. We didn't want, Veritas won it, number 3, but we got top 30. But our idea is actually how we actually spread out the city, even though we want to make it compact, because over there it's actually flooded. It's all the time in water. So we have to actually understand how to design with water, and this is how we approach it. And they took notice of that, and it's going to be taken note of how water and tropical design being handled. Okay, this is another one, the last project that I was going to show to you. You know, people say public housing is just a public housing, right? But in my opinion, a public housing needs to create a community too. So what we did was we sprinkle buildings on the landscape. So most people will have 5-story podium parking, but from here you actually don't see the podium parking because actually we purposely do it in the sunken plaza. So by the side is all rooms, but behind it is actually parking. So the idea is you still have got to have high rise because of the density that you need to create. But in my opinion, that parking issue is the one that actually saw in our own development, so we need to address that. So that's the reason why we need to learn how to handle multi-story parking with buildings now. Even though with the advent of TOD, but whatever it is, we still have got to contend with this sort of multi-story parking, even though now, I think KL, they just launched the Plan Struktur Kuala Lumpur 2040. So I advise you all have a look at document and comment it, because that's going to be our lifeline for the next 20 years and how KL will be if you don't comment it positively. And some of the issues that I was saying about, like multi-story parking, open spaces, vertical open space, all need to be addressed by us. Thank you very much.